I'm 28 years old, and recently I left my job in real estate to start my own business. It's always been a dream of mine to create something from the ground up, and I felt like now was the right time to go for it. A few months ago, I made the leap and decided to put all my energy into this venture. I had saved enough money and was determined to make it work. About 6 months ago, I approached my parents to see if they would invest in my new business. My dad has a lot of experience running the family car dealership with my uncle, and my mom manages the accounting. I thought their expertise would be invaluable. However, I made the mistake of discussing this at a family dinner where my younger brother was also present. He's 25 and has been working in sales for a couple of years, always showing a lot of ambition. A couple of weeks later, my brother announced that he, too, wanted to start his own business and was looking for our parents to invest in him. At first, I thought he was joking, but he was serious and had even quit his job, saying he was inspired by me. I tried not to let it get to me, thinking it wouldn't affect my plans, but I was wrong. At another family dinner a few weeks after his announcement, my parents told me they could only invest in one of us. They decided to support my brother, who amusingly wanted to go into the real estate business. Just like me, he had no prior interest or knowledge in the field, which made their decision even more confusing and hurtful. My parents said they believed he had more business acumen, suggesting I could join him in his venture, though it wouldn't be an equal partnership. This felt like a slap in the face, especially since I've been in the real estate industry and know what I'm doing. Feeling hurt and betrayed, I ended up having a big argument with my brother. I accused him of copying my ideas and brought up past incidents where he tried to compete with me. He fired back, saying it wasn't his fault our parents preferred him, claiming he was just better. It was a petty and immature exchange, and my parents tried to calm things down by insisting they loved us both equally. They said they just thought my brother had more potential in business. After that day, I decided to cut off contact with my family. It was too painful to be treated like I was lesser than my brother. It's been 6 months since then, and I haven't spoken to them. My parents tried reaching out a few times, but when I didn't respond, they eventually stopped after a few weeks. I haven't attended any family events recently and kept to myself during the holidays to avoid awkward encounters. It's just easier that way. I've cut off all contact with them, and honestly, I prefer it that way. However, about 2 weeks ago, something shocking happened. My longtime girlfriend and I planned a weekend getaway where I intended to propose to her. A few hours after we arrived, she went to take a shower. I realized I had left my phone at home, so I decided to use hers to charge mine. When I picked up her phone, I saw she had several texts from my dad, which was odd because I've been out of touch with my family. Even though we have a strict no-snooping rule, I broke it this once, and I'm glad I did. I guessed her password, which I got on the second try, and found out they had been talking for months. She had been sending him pictures of my business plans, investor lists, locations I wanted to set up, and other confidential business documents. I was shocked that she had access to these documents since I work from home and she lives with me, but it was heartbreaking to find out she was sharing them with my dad. I realized my dad would likely use this information to help my brother get ahead of me. I discovered she was being paid for her betrayal. My dad would send her money after each batch of information, and she would confirm the receipt. She wasn't just sharing business details. She was also telling him personal things, like who I was meeting with and what I said about them or my brother. She was a freelance writer, and I had been supporting her financially since she quit her stable job. Couldn't understand why she needed the money so badly that she'd sabotage our relationship. I never pressured her to contribute to expenses and had always supported her. Seeing those messages felt like something out of a bad movie. I was disturbed and decided to leave immediately. I grabbed my bags, which I hadn't unpacked, and drove away from the hotel. I didn't stop or check my phone until I was far away. After almost 2 hours, I stopped at a gas station because I felt nauseous and needed a soda. I finally checked my phone and saw multiple missed calls and texts from my girlfriend. She was panicking, asking where I was and if something was wrong, clearly unaware that I knew about her betrayal. I had no idea what to say to her, so I decided to take a break and think things through. The betrayal from my longtime girlfriend spying on me from my parents was overwhelming. I felt a mix of emotions: betrayal, hurt, anger, and sadness. But then I decided I wouldn't let them win. Instead of running away, I turned the car around and headed back to the hotel with a plan in mind. When I got back, she seemed genuinely happy to see me. It was hard to act normal, but I put on a front and told her that I had been gone because I was planning something special and needed time to gather my thoughts. I went down on one knee and proposed, saying that thinking about spending my life with her helped me realize I was doing the right thing. She was thrilled and accepted immediately. It was crazy to think she was still willing to marry me while betraying me behind my back. I told her I wanted to reconnect with my parents and share the good news, pretending to be over our feud. She seemed a bit surprised, but quickly supported the idea, encouraging me to make amends. I texted my parents right after we got engaged, while she called her family to share the news. The next day, my dad replied, happy that I was apologizing and wanting to reconnect. I immediately started planning an engagement party, telling my girlfriend I'd handle everything as a surprise for her. I enlisted a friend who's an event planner to help. The party was at my house, and I invited everyone we knew, including her family and friends. I managed to keep everything under wraps until the last moment. On the day of the party, with everyone present, I made a speech. I began by thanking my girlfriend and family for everything, then dropped the bombshell. I revealed that I knew about the secret betrayal that had been going on for months. I called my girlfriend a sellout and had harsh words for my parents, but I saved the sharpest insults for my brother, whom I saw as the instigator. I pointed out that even with access to my business ideas, he still needed me to succeed because even our parents didn't fully believe in him. The party took place a week after I discovered the betrayal, giving me enough time to set everything up. I even got screenshots of the text conversations between my girlfriend and my dad from her phone. Since I knew her password, it was easy to sneak into her phone while she was asleep and delete any proof of my actions. I had booklets made from the screenshots and handed them out to each guest after my speech, just to show everyone how deceitful and psychotic the people involved were. The guests were stunned, but my family and girlfriend were the most shocked. She left the room in tears and refused to come out until everyone was gone. After distributing the booklets, most guests left, but my family stayed and tried to argue with me. I wasn't having any of it and told them to leave or I'd call the cops, making the situation even uglier. They left, likely afraid of further embarrassment in front of relatives who'd heard everything. This would undoubtedly become the talk of the town in the coming days. I didn't hear from my parents after that, but I did have to talk to my girlfriend that night. She left after the party and moved back in with her parents. However, before she left, she confronted me, saying I was a horrible person for putting her through that. She explained that the only reason she had spied on me was to get money for her little sister's education since she was about to start med school. When I asked why she didn't just ask me for help, she said she was too proud. My dad had offered her money in exchange for information, and she didn't think it through. He had told her he wanted the information to help me with my business, but she didn't realize he might use it to help my brother instead, despite knowing about our issues. She admitted that what she did was wrong, but said my actions were even worse. She realized I had known about her betrayal since the day I proposed and accused me of deliberately humiliating her and my parents instead of breaking up with her immediately. It was clear we were done, but she mentioned that she was planning to stop spying on me after our engagement. That was the last conversation we had before she left. Since the engagement party, I haven't spoken to anyone and have just been going to work and coming home. I thought the party and humiliating them would make me feel better, but it didn't. I realized she was right that my actions were pretty psychotic, and I feel bad about it. So am I the jerk for throwing a party just to humiliate my girlfriend? Update. It's been 2 weeks since my ex and I broke up. She came back today to pick up some of her things, and we didn't speak at all. She pretended I wasn't there, which hurt, but I guess it's deserved. She did something incredibly hurtful and gave me trust issues, and I humiliated her in front of everyone she cared about. I suppose we're even now. It's still going to hurt for a while, but I don't think I owe her an apology. Thanks for the advice, everyone. I feel better about myself now. As for my parents, they still haven't reached out, and honestly, it's probably for the best. They already have all my business plans and ideas, which sucks, but there's not much I can do now that the damage is done. The best I can hope for is that my brother doesn't use any of it, though that seems unlikely. After I humiliated him at the party, I doubt he'll hold back. So things are looking bleak on the business front, but I hope to get through it somehow. Update 2. Hi everyone, it's been almost a month since my last update, and today I finally embarked on a new business journey. I know it takes time to set up a business, but I'm really excited to be working on something I enjoy. All the planning and hours I put in are finally paying off, and it's a great distraction from thinking about my ex. Even though she betrayed me, I still miss her and the good times we had. I'm in therapy now, trying to work through the trauma and process my feelings. It's tough, but having this new job to focus on makes me feel hopeful. No news about my brother or what he's up to, but if I manage to establish my business first, I'll have a head start, so fingers crossed. Update 3. I recently learned that my family is moving away because my brother is starting his business in another state. He doesn't want to be rivals anymore. He told me all about it in a long email and made sure to mention that he was sorry I wasn't mentally stable enough to handle my emotions like a normal adult. He accused me of wanting to be the center of attention without having any qualities to justify it, but wished me well and hoped I would stay away from him and our parents. It's been almost 3 months since the engagement party, and I'm finally starting to deal with and process everything better than I was back then. I also heard that my ex is going out on dates and getting back to her usual life. I guess everyone's moving on, and so am I. My business is doing all right, and with time, I'll be fine again.
During our honeymoon, my mother-in-law pulled off a shocking betrayal by stealing my $25,000 diamond necklace. When we got home and I asked her about it, she exploded in anger. She slapped me hard and pushed me against the wall. To my surprise, my husband stood by her side. Heartbroken, I left the house, planning my revenge. They had no idea I had a big surprise coming that would change everything. My name is Lisa, and I'm a 30-year-old software developer living in San Francisco. When I think back to my life, I can still remember the excitement of my wedding day, the hope I felt for the future, and the way my heart swelled with love for my college sweetheart, James. We had met during our university years and bonded over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of what our lives would look like. I thought I had found my perfect partner. But as the saying goes, the path to true happiness isn't always smooth. Shortly after we exchanged vows, I realized that my fairy tale was beginning to unravel. The first signs of trouble were subtle, like a slow leak in a tire that gradually worsens until you're stranded on the side of the road. The culprit? James's mother, Martha. Martha, a woman in her mid-50s, raised James on her own and had always been fiercely protective of him. I had seen this dynamic during our dating years. She often called him several times a day, insisting on knowing his whereabouts and opinions on everything. I had assumed it was just a quirky part of their relationship, something I could work around. After all, love is about compromise, right? But once we were married, her interference turned into something much more invasive. Almost immediately, Martha began criticizing my choices, everything from the way I decorated our home to the meals I prepared. I remember one particular instance when she visited unannounced and found me experimenting with a new recipe. "What are you cooking, Lisa?" "That looks awful," she said with a disdainful look on her face, as if she were inspecting a science experiment gone wrong. "Just trying a new pasta dish, Martha. I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. Isn't it a bit too rich? You should stick to the basics, she retorted, shaking her head. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment, but I tried to brush it off. I thought she means well. I kept reminding myself that she was just trying to help, even when it felt like she was tearing me down. As weeks turned into months, her visits became more frequent and less welcome. She would drop by without calling, using a spare key that I didn't even know she had. I would walk into our living room, only to find her rearranging the furniture as if it were her own home. "This will give the space a better flow," she would say, waving her hand dismissively when I expressed my hesitations. The tension between Martha and me grew, and James seemed oblivious. Whenever I would try to bring it up, he would shrug it off, saying things like, "You know how my mom is. Just try to be patient." It was infuriating. How could he not see how her behavior was affecting me? I began to feel isolated, trapped in a situation where my voice was drowned out by his mother's constant interference. The love I felt for James started to fade under the weight of frustration and hurt. Then, one day, James suggested we go on a honeymoon to Hawaii, a chance to reconnect and escape the chaos. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Finally, a break for Martha. However, that relief was short-lived when Martha insisted on joining us. "James, I don't think that's a good idea," I said, trying to mask my panic. But James, for the first time, stood his ground. "Mom, it's not a family trip. It's our honeymoon, just Lisa and me." I was stunned. This was the first time I saw him assert himself against his mother, and it filled me with hope. Maybe there was a chance for us after all. When we returned from the trip, everything seemed to be in place. James and I had rekindled our romance, and I was excited to return home. But when I opened the door to our bedroom, my heart dropped. Our room was a disaster zone. Clothes were thrown everywhere, jewelry drawers were broken, and my precious diamond necklace, a wedding gift from my mother worth $25,000, was missing. "James, come here," I screamed, my voice shaking. "What's wrong?" he asked, rushing into the room. "I can't find my necklace. Look at this mess. What happened here?" I gestured wildly at the chaos. James's face paled as he surveyed the room. "I don't know." "This is so strange," he muttered, confusion and concern etched across his face. Desperate, I turned to him. "Do you think it could be?" "No, Lisa. I can't believe my mother would do something like this," he interrupted, his tone defensive. I swallowed hard, feeling a knot form in my stomach. But deep down, the suspicion crept in. I couldn't shake the feeling that Martha was somehow involved. I needed to find answers. That night, sleep eluded me as I tossed and turned, haunted by the disarray of our bedroom and the absence of my cherished necklace. I couldn't understand how Martha could betray me like this. The woman who I thought was merely overbearing had transformed into someone I feared. The following day, I decided to take action. I visited several jewelry stores in the area, searching for any sign of my necklace. After hours of looking and nearly giving up hope, I entered a small shop tucked away in a corner of the city. As I scanned the displays, my heart stopped. There it was, my diamond necklace gleaming under the glass. "Excuse me," I called the shopkeeper over. "Can I see that necklace, please?" When I held it in my hands, it felt like the ground beneath me shifted. I needed to know who had sold it. "Can you show me the CCTV footage from when this necklace came in?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. The shopkeeper obliged, and as I watched the footage, my heart sank. There, clearly on the screen, was Martha, my mother-in-law, handing over my precious necklace. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, anger, and disbelief. Furious, I rushed home, ready to confront her. But as I approached the door, I found Martha waiting for me, arms crossed and a smug smile on her face. "What are you doing here, Lisa? You look like you've seen a ghost," she sneered. "Don't play games with me, Martha." "I know what you did," I snapped, my heart pounding. Her smile faltered for a moment, and in that split second, I felt a surge of confidence. I had the proof, but what happened next would change everything. I was about to confront the woman who had wreaked havoc in my life. I just didn't know how deep the betrayal would run. Standing at the doorstep, I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. Martha's presence was suffocating, and I felt the anger bubbling inside me like a volcano ready to erupt. I had never imagined confronting my mother-in-law would feel like this, like stepping into a battlefield where the stakes were so high. "Lisa, why are you staring at me like that? If you have something to say, just say it," Martha said, her tone dripping with mockery. "Enough with the games, Martha. I know you sold my diamond necklace," I blurted out, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. "I saw you on the security footage at the jewelry store." Her expression changed instantaneously. The smugness vanished, replaced by a flicker of anger. "How dare you accuse me of stealing?" she retorted, her voice rising. "You've always had a wild imagination, haven't you?" "I'm not imagining anything. You took something that doesn't belong to you, and it's time you admit it." I shot back, stepping closer to her, unwilling to let her intimidation tactics work on me this time. Martha's eyes narrowed as she took a step forward, invading my personal space. "You think you can come into my house and throw accusations at me? You're just jealous that I raised James alone and that he still cares for me. You'll never be as important as his mother," she spat, her voice full of venom. "Being his wife doesn't mean I'm less important. You need to understand that I'm part of this family too, but you act like I'm just an inconvenience," I replied, my heart racing. I felt an overwhelming need to defend myself, to make her see that I was not going to back down this time. Suddenly, James walked through the door, a bag of groceries in hand. The moment he saw us standing there, tension thick in the air, he dropped the bag and rushed over. "What's going on? Why does it look like you two are about to kill each other?" "Martha has been lying to me, James. I know she sold my necklace, and I'm done pretending everything is fine," I said, my voice rising. I turned to him, desperate for support. "You need to believe me. I have proof." James looked between us, confusion etched on his face. "Mom, is this true?" he asked, his tone wavering. "I didn't do anything. Lisa is just trying to stir up trouble because she can't handle the fact that I'm still in your life," Martha interjected, throwing her hands up defensively. James's gaze shifted from his mother to me, and I could see the turmoil in his eyes. "I need to hear this from both of you. What exactly happened?" he asked, trying to mediate. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "I found the necklace in a pawn shop, James. I have the footage. Your mother sold it while we were on our honeymoon," I explained, the words rushing out of me. James turned to Martha, who was now visibly sweating, her composure cracking. "Is that true? Did you sell Lisa's necklace?" I borrowed it," she stammered, trying to twist the narrative. "I thought it was just lying around. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." "Borrowed? It's not borrowing if you sell it," I shouted, my frustration boiling over. "You stole it. You knew how much it meant to me." "Stop yelling, both of you," James shouted, his voice echoing in the small entryway. "This is not helping. Mom, why would you do something like this?" "It was a mistake," Martha snapped, her defensive nature kicking in. "I thought it was just an old piece of jewelry, something that was forgotten. I didn't know it was special to her." "Enough of your excuses," I exclaimed. "You've done nothing but disrespect me since day one. I've tried to be patient, but this is crossing a line." James's silence was deafening. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for him to pull me back or let me fall. "I can't believe this," James finally said, looking defeated. "Mom, you have to understand what you did is unacceptable. We need to figure out how to fix this." "Fix this? How can we fix this when she's made it clear she doesn't trust me?" I said, pointing at Martha. "I'm done being the one who has to compromise. You need to make a choice, James." Martha's eyes flashed with anger as she took a step back, her expression darkening. "You think you can come into our family and make demands? You're nothing without my son." That statement stung like a slap to the face, and I felt tears prick my eyes. "I am not nothing. I am his wife, and I deserve your respect." James looked between us, visibly torn. I need time to think, he finally said, his voice low. I can't deal with this right now. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me alone with Martha. The tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I felt a sense of despair wash over me, knowing that things had reached a breaking point. Your husband is weak, Lisa, Martha sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. You'll never win this fight. I will always be his mother. In that moment, I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic environment any longer. I felt like a puppet on strings, and it was time to cut them. I needed to reclaim my life, my identity, and my dignity. With that thought, I turned on my heel and walked out, determined to find a way to seek justice for the betrayal I had suffered. Leaving James and Martha in that heated moment was one of the hardest things I had ever done. I felt like I was walking away from my marriage, but I knew that staying would only lead to more heartache. As I drove back to my mother's house, my heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. I couldn't let Martha's betrayal go unpunished. When I arrived, my mother was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she prepared dinner. The smell of her famous lasagna filled the air, and for a brief moment, I felt comforted. But the weight of my troubles came crashing back as I recounted the events of the day. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you're going through this, my mother said, her eyes filled with concern. You deserve so much better. I need to do something about it, Mom. I can't just let her get away with this, I replied, my voice firm. I'm going to report her to the police. My mother's face reflected my own determination. If that's what you think is best, then I support you. We'll gather any evidence you need. That night, we pored over the footage from the jewelry store and made a list of everything that had happened. I documented my conversations with James, highlighting how dismissive he had been about Martha's behavior. I felt empowered, like I was taking back control over my life. The next day, I contacted the local police department and scheduled an appointment to report the theft. As I prepared for my meeting, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, nervousness, anger, but also a sense of purpose. I was no longer the quiet wife being pushed around. I was ready to stand up for myself. When I arrived at the station, I was greeted by an officer who took me into a small room to discuss my case. I showed him the footage of Martha selling the necklace and explained the situation. The officer listened intently, nodding along as I spoke. This is a serious matter, Ms. Miller. Theft is not something we take lightly. We'll need to investigate further, but I assure you that we will do everything we can to help you, he said, his tone reassuring. Relief washed over me as I left the station. I had taken the first step toward justice, and I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was determined to see this through, no matter how hard it might be. Over the next few days, the police worked diligently on my case, collecting evidence and reaching out to pawn shops in the area. They were able to confirm the sale of my necklace and also uncovered additional details that pointed to Martha's history of questionable behavior. One afternoon, as I was sitting at my mother's kitchen table, my phone rang. It was the officer I had spoken to earlier. Ms. Miller, we've gathered enough evidence to move forward with an arrest. Would you like to be present when we take your mother-in-law into custody? He asked. I hesitated for a moment, the gravity of the situation hitting me. But then I remembered how much Martha had hurt me, how she had invaded my life and disrespected my marriage. Yes, I want to be there, I replied, my voice steady. The following day, I drove to the location where they had planned to arrest Martha. My heart raced as I waited, anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. I couldn't believe it had come to this. My mother-in-law, the woman who was supposed to support me, was about to face the consequences of her actions. When the police arrived, they approached Martha as she was leaving her house, her usual air of arrogance stripped away. I watched from a distance, my heart pounding in my chest. Martha Ellen, you are under arrest for theft, the officer announced, and I felt a surge of triumph rush through me. This was justice. As they handcuffed her and led her away, I stood there, watching her world crumble. I realized that I was finally free from the chains that had bound me, and in that moment, I felt empowered. I was no longer the victim. I was a survivor, ready to reclaim my life. The day Martha was arrested marked a pivotal moment in my life. I had faced her down and taken control of my own narrative. After the police took her away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and an undeniable sense of empowerment. I knew that I had done the right thing, but the reality of the situation weighed heavily on my heart. In the days that followed, I found myself in a whirlwind of legal processes. Martha's arrest led to charges of theft, and I learned that she would likely face serious consequences for her actions. I felt a sense of closure starting to form, but I also had to confront the fact that my marriage with James was hanging by a thread. James reached out to me multiple times, pleading for a chance to talk. I was hesitant, but knew we needed to address the elephant in the room. One evening, we met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. As I walked in, I felt a mixture of hope and dread. Could we salvage our relationship, or had too much damage been done? "Lisa, I'm so glad you agreed to meet," James said, his voice shaky as he sat down across from me. "I've been worried sick about you." "I've been worried about you too, James," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "But we need to talk about everything that's happened. You need to understand how hurtful your mother's actions were and how your support, or lack thereof, affected me." He nodded, looking down at his coffee. "I know. I can't believe she would do something like that. I should have stood up for you sooner. I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't enough, James. Your mother has caused irreparable harm," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I've lost trust in both of you. You need to decide whose side you're on." "I'm on your side, Lisa." "I love you," he exclaimed, desperation creeping into his voice. "Then you need to prove it." "I can't continue in a marriage where I feel like a second-class citizen," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You need to choose between me and her." We talked for hours, but it was clear that the rift between us was too wide. Although he professed his love for me, I couldn't shake the feeling that his loyalty to his mother would always come first. As we parted ways that evening, I knew I had made my decision. The following week, I filed for divorce. It was painful, but I felt lighter, as if I had shed a weight I had been carrying for far too long. Martha's court date was set for a few weeks later. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation as I entered the courtroom. I wanted to see justice served, to show Martha that her actions had consequences. When she walked in, she looked older, more haggard than I had ever seen her. It was a stark reminder of how far things had fallen. The proceedings were swift. The evidence was clear, and it didn't take long for the judge to issue a verdict. Martha was sentenced to community service and ordered to pay restitution for the necklace, along with additional fines totaling $25,000. As the gavel struck, I felt a surge of vindication. This was justice, and I had finally reclaimed my life. With the divorce finalized shortly after and Martha's fate sealed, I began to embrace my newfound freedom. I focused on my career, pouring my energy into projects that inspired me. I took up new hobbies, explored the city, and spent quality time with my mother, who had been my rock throughout this tumultuous journey. In the months that followed, I learned to cherish my independence. I discovered my strength in solitude and began to rebuild my life on my terms. I reflected on the lessons I had learned about trust, respect, and the importance of standing up for myself. As I sat in my apartment one evening, sipping a glass of wine and watching the sunset over the city skyline, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I was no longer bound by the toxicity of my past. I had turned the page and was ready to embrace a bright new chapter filled with hope and possibilities. I had faced betrayal and fought for justice, and now I was finally free.
This story is titled, "My Dad Doesn't Buy Me Food, So I Get a Job to Eat at 15 Years Old. But when my stepmom shows up, she demanded this." What's up, you all? Life sucks right now. I'm Mike, 15, and honestly, it feels like I'm just stuck in survival mode all the time. Let me back up a bit. My parents split when I was 9, and my dad got custody. At first, I thought that was better. My mom didn't seem too interested in me anyway. Living with my dad wasn't exactly great either, though. He worked weird hours, was barely around, and when he was, he didn't act like much of a parent. It's not like he was mean or anything, but it was like I didn't exist to him most of the time. He didn't ask me about school at all or whether I needed anything in general, just silence. The food situation was especially rough. The fridge was almost always empty, and when there was something in there, it was random stuff like ketchup or a leftover slice of stale bread. I learned quickly that if I didn't figure out food for myself, I wasn't eating. School lunches became my lifeline, but weekends were the worst. There were times I'd go through the pantry and find nothing but expired cans or a pack of crackers someone forgot about. A lot of nights, I just went to bed hungry, hoping the growling in my stomach would quiet down if I fell asleep fast enough. And yeah, I got desperate enough to dig through restaurant dumpsters a few times. I know it's nasty and embarrassing, but when you're starving, you stop caring. At school, I tried to act like everything was fine. I didn't want to be the kid people felt sorry for. It's not like I had a ton of friends, but the ones I did have didn't need to know I was basically living off scraps. So I kept my head down, focused on not drawing attention, and tried to get through the day without my stomach growling loud enough for the whole class to hear. Eventually, I got tired of feeling like this. I wanted some control over my life. That's when I decided to look for a job. Problem is, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was 15 with zero work experience. Who's gonna hire me? I applied everywhere. Fast food places, grocery stores, even this shady gas station. Weeks went by, and nobody called me back. I started thinking maybe I was stuck like this forever, but then I got lucky. This tiny convenience store finally gave me a shot. The work wasn't glamorous, stocking shelves, running the register, cleaning up messes, but it was a job. I wasn't gonna complain. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to buy some bread, milk, and maybe a bag of chips if I was feeling fancy. That first paycheck felt amazing, and I started to feel like I wasn't completely helpless. I didn't have to wait around for my dad to remember I existed, or hope the school lunch lady wouldn't notice me sneaking an extra apple. I could take care of myself, at least a little. But it was also hard. Balancing work and school turned out to be way harder than I thought. I'd get home from my shifts completely wiped, with no energy left for homework. My grades started slipping, and a couple of my teachers pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay. What was I supposed to say? That I had to work because if I didn't, I wouldn't eat? So I lied. I told them I was just tired, that I'd catch up soon. But deep down, I knew I was barely hanging on. Every day felt like I was running on empty, just trying to make it to the next meal, the next shift, the next day. On top of all that, I started noticing things about my dad that didn't sit right. Like he was always saying how he worked so hard to provide for us, but I never saw where that money went. He'd come home late, looking all stressed out, but the bills still piled up, and the house still felt like it was falling apart. I didn't ask questions, though. What was the point? I kept telling myself this was temporary, that if I could just make it through high school, I'd be able to move out, get a better job, and leave all this behind. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all I had. But then one day, I come home from my shift, and there's a stranger sitting in our living room. A beautiful woman dressed all fancy, nails done, with this weird smile plastered on her face. I stood there staring at her trying to figure out what was going on. Turns out this was Lisa, my dad's new wife. Apparently, while I was out here working just to keep myself fed, my dad had been busy getting married. Married. Without even letting me know. I didn't even know he was dating anyone. It was like this huge life decision happened, and I wasn't even an afterthought. When I asked him what was going on, he just shrugged and said, "It's nothing for you to worry about." Oh, cool. Thanks, Dad. Maybe it's none of my business that he's dating someone, but at least he could tell me that this someone is coming to live with us. Lisa moved in a week later, and everything changed, and not in a good way. She came in like she was running the place, redecorating the house and making all these new rules. Suddenly, my shoes couldn't be by the door, the TV couldn't be left on, and even the way I folded my laundry was wrong. At first, I tried to stay out of her way. I figured if I just kept my head down, things would blow over. But nah. She had this way of making me feel like I didn't belong in my own house. She'd rearrange things and then get mad when I messed it up. Like, "Sorry for opening the pantry to grab food, Lisa. My bad for existing." Speaking of food, that became a whole new issue. Lisa cooked meals, but only enough for her and my dad. If I wanted to eat, I had to figure it out on my own. And if I tried to grab leftovers, forget it. She'd throw out anything extra before I could even get to it. Once I tried to eat some rice she left on the stove, and she told me, "That's not for you." It was like she went out of her way to make sure I felt like an outsider. My dad didn't do anything about it, of course. If anything, he seemed totally fine with it. He'd sit there, letting Lisa run the show, acting like this was all normal. I started avoiding the kitchen altogether, just to avoid the awkwardness. Most nights, I'd just eat something small in my room, bread, maybe some ramen if I had it. It didn't stop there, though. Lisa didn't just take over the house. She started butting into my life too. She had opinions about everything. How I dressed, how I kept my room, even how I spent my time. She once told me my clothes made me look sloppy and that I should at least try to look decent. I wanted to tell her to mind her own business. But what was the point? Things hit a new low when she found out I was working. I guess she noticed me coming home late from school after my shifts or saw my uniform in the laundry. Instead of being impressed that I was handling my own stuff, she got mad. Like, actually mad. She cornered me one evening and started grilling me about why I hadn't told her I had a job. I tried to explain that it wasn't really her business, but she wasn't having it. If you're earning money, you need to contribute to this household, she said, all serious. I told her I barely made enough to cover food and school supplies for myself, but she didn't care. That's not my problem, she said. From then on, she demanded I either give her half my paycheck or start paying rent. Rent. To live in a house where I wasn't even allowed to eat the food. I couldn't believe it. I tried talking to my dad, hoping he'd back me up, but nope. He just nodded along with Lisa, saying it was time I learned some responsibility. I am so furious right now. What can I do? Should I give her half of my paycheck? I already earn little, and this job is what keeps me alive. I can't imagine how I could survive if I gave her half of it. But I also know that she won't back up even if I begged her. Please, guys, tell me what should I do? I really need help. Update 1. Hey guys, I just wanted you to know that I caved and gave her the paycheck. I didn't know what else to do. The pressure was unbearable, and honestly, I was terrified she'd convince my dad to kick me out if I didn't. But of course, it didn't stop there. Once I started handing over half my paycheck, you'd think Lisa would back off a bit. Like, okay, I'm contributing, so maybe she'd stop treating me like the enemy. But if anything, it just made her worse. Every week when I got paid, she was waiting for her cut. I'd barely be through the door before she'd hold out her hand like a debt collector. You know the rules, she'd say with this smug smile. Rules. Like I'd signed some contract agreeing to this madness. Half my pay gone before I even had a chance to think about what I needed. With what was left, I'd scrape by. Bread, ramen, maybe some fruit if it was cheap. Forget about anything extra. Every dollar was stretched thin, and even then, it didn't feel like enough. What pissed me off is that it didn't stop at taking my money. She kept adding more to my responsibilities. It wasn't just cleaning up after myself anymore. I was expected to clean the whole house, scrub the bathroom, vacuum the living room, do the dishes, all of it. And of course, it was never good enough. She'd walk around after I finished, pointing out random spots I missed, or telling me I didn't put enough effort in. At this point, I was barely sleeping. Between school, work, and all the extra chores, I felt like a zombie. I'd come home from a shift, dead tired, and there'd be a pile of dirty dishes waiting for me. If I tried to leave them for the next day, Lisa would lose it. She'd bang on my door yelling about how I was ungrateful and disrespectful. It wasn't just the chores either. Lisa had this habit of going through my stuff when I wasn't home. I'd come back from work and find my backpack open, my drawers rifled through. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it, but then I noticed things missing. Small amounts of cash, snacks I'd bought for myself, even some personal stuff like my notebook. When I confronted her, she acted all innocent. Oh, I was just tidying up, she'd say with that fake smile. Tidying up? Really? Taking my money and snacks was tidying up? The worst part was how she justified it. You live under this roof, so you should be contributing more, she'd say. It's not fair for your dad and me to do everything, while I was the one doing all the chores, paying half my paycheck, and taking care of myself. What exactly were they doing? Even school became impossible to focus on. I'd sit in class, barely able to keep my eyes open, and my teachers would ask if I was okay. What was I supposed to say? Oh yeah, everything's great. I'm just a full-time maid who also works a part-time job to pay rent to my dad's new wife. I couldn't even talk to my friends about it. They didn't know what was going on, and I didn't want to explain. Most of them had normal homes, with parents who actually cared about them. They'd never understand what it felt like to live like this. It was around this time that I started noticing something else. While I was barely scraping by, Lisa and my dad seemed to be living just fine. New clothes, fancy takeout, random shopping bags that Lisa brought home almost every week. Where was all that money coming from? My dad wasn't exactly rolling in cash, and Lisa didn't have a job. I tried not to think about it, but it nagged at me. How were they affording all this while I was paying half my paycheck and still going hungry? All I can do is survive, one day at a time, one paycheck at a time. But deep down, I know this isn't sustainable. Something had to give eventually. I just don't know when or how. Maybe Lisa will someday stop tormenting me and leave me alone. Or maybe my dad will try to change what's happening. I really don't know. But I know that I'm tired of all of this. If anything changes, I'll probably post an update. Update 2. Hey, it's Mike again. You won't believe what happened these last few days. When everything piles up, there's always a breaking point, right? Like, you can deal with crap for so long, but eventually, something tips the scale. For me, it happened one Thursday after work. I got home, exhausted like always, and went straight to my room to drop my stuff. I was planning to grab some food, or whatever I could find, and crash early. But when I opened my backpack, something felt off. I always kept my tip money in a small envelope tucked in a side pocket. It wasn't much, but I'd been saving it for weeks to get new shoes for school. My current pair had holes in them, and with the rainy season coming up, I was sick of walking around with soggy socks. But when I reached for the envelope, it was gone. At first, I thought maybe I misplaced it. I emptied out my entire bag, flipping through every notebook and pocket, but it wasn't there. My stomach sank. There was only one explanation. Lisa? She had gone over my bag again. The anger hit me like a wave. That money wasn't just cash. It was weeks of work, hours spent on my feet at the store, customers yelling at me over 50-cent price differences. It was mine, and now it was gone. I stormed out of my room and headed straight for the living room, where Lisa was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone. My dad was next to her, half watching TV, not even noticing I was there. "Where the hell is my money?" I shouted. My voice was loud enough to make Lisa jump, but she recovered quickly, acting all casual as she lounged on the couch. "What money?" she asked, not even bothering to look at me, flipping through her phone like I didn't exist. "The tips from my bag," I said, my voice rising. "I know you took it. It was there this morning, and now it's gone." She finally glanced up at me, her face completely unfazed. "Oh, that. I used it for groceries. You live here, don't you? It's only fair you help out." "Fair?" I yelled, my fists clenched. "Are you freaking kidding me? I already give you half my paycheck every week. I do all the housework, and now you're just stealing from me? You didn't even ask." She tried to put on the innocence mask. "Don't be so dramatic, Mike. It's just money. You'll earn more." "That wasn't for you," I snapped. "That money was for shoes. I've been saving for weeks because my shoes are falling apart, and you just—" "Don't raise your voice at me, kid," she interrupted sharply. "You're living under our roof, eating our food, and using our electricity. If anything, you should be giving us more." I turned to my dad, desperate for him to step in. "You're okay with this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "She's stealing from me and you're just letting her get away with it?" He barely glanced up from the TV, his expression blank. "Lisa's right. We're all contributing here. You need to stop acting like a spoiled brat." And that was it. That was the moment I realized I was completely alone in this house. It didn't matter how much I gave, how hard I worked, or how much I sacrificed. To them, I wasn't family. I wasn't even a person. I was just a convenience, a resource they could drain to make their lives easier. My throat burned and my chest felt tight, but I refused to let them see me break. I marched back to my room and slammed the door, sitting on the edge of my bed, my fists shaking in my lap. I couldn't keep living like this. They weren't going to stop. No matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. But where could I go? Who could I turn to? I was trapped, furious, and completely alone. Something had to give, but I had no idea what to do next. Then, almost without thinking, I picked up my phone and my fingers hovered over the numbers, trembling slightly as I tried to decide if I should really go through with it. A number I hadn't used in years flickered in the back of my mind. It was buried deep in my memory, one I thought I'd forgotten until now. My mom. I hadn't spoken to her since I was 10. Back then, she'd called once to wish me a happy birthday, but the conversation had been short and awkward. After that, she disappeared completely. No visits, no phone calls, not even a text. I hated the idea of calling her, but I didn't have a choice. The phone rang twice before she answered. Then I heard her voice for the first time in years. "Hello?" For a second, I froze. I didn't know what to say. "It's me," I finally managed. "Mike." There was a pause, and then she said, "Mike, is everything okay?" That question broke something in me. I hadn't heard genuine concern in someone's voice in so long that I didn't know how to handle it. Before I knew it, everything started pouring out. The neglect, the money, the chores, the constant feeling of being unwanted. I told her about how Lisa treated me, how my dad let it happen, and how they'd stolen my savings. By the time I was done, I was shaking. I thought maybe I'd said too much, or that she'd think I was being dramatic. But when she spoke, her voice wasn't calm. It was anger. "He's been taking child support this whole time," she said. I blinked. "What?" "I've been sending him money every month since the divorce," she said, trying to explain to me what child support is. "It was supposed to be for you, for food, clothes, school supplies, and he's been keeping it?" I was confused. All those years of struggling, going hungry, wearing the same beat-up clothes, feeling like I had to fend for myself. It didn't have to be that way. He had the money. He just chose not to spend it on me. I'll figure something out, she said after a moment. You can't stay there. I'll talk to someone, maybe get a lawyer involved, but you have to hang on a little longer while I sort this out. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her it wasn't that easy, that things were too messed up, but hearing her say she'd try to help, really help, made something inside me loosen. For the first time, it felt like there might actually be a way out. I took a deep breath and said, okay. The call ended, but my mind kept racing. It wasn't a fix, not yet, but it was more than I'd had in years. I'm not completely alone anymore. Someone now knows what I was going through, apart from you guys, and will actually do something about it. Now, since my mom didn't give a shit about me all these years, I'm also wondering why she's stepping in now. When I called her, I thought she would hang up on me once she heard my voice. What do you guys think? Update 3. Hey guys, I came to tell you how everything started to flip over. Remember when I told you I didn't know how to feel when my mom said she'd try to help? While it felt good to hear her say she'd do something, part of me couldn't help but wonder if she really cared about me, or if she was just mad about the money she'd been sending all these years. I mean, it's not like she'd been around before. Was this about me? Or was it about her feeling ripped off? Turns out it was probably more about the money. She had no idea my dad had been taking her payments and doing who knows what with them. I remember when I told her in that phone call that I'd been working to survive, she was furious. Not because of what I went through, but because she'd been footing the bill for years without seeing where it was going. He's been stealing from both of us, she said, her voice sharp. Anyway, after the call, I tried not to let myself get too excited. I didn't want to trust her completely, not yet. What if she changed her mind? What if she got busy and forgot about me again? But at the same time, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, this could be my way out. In the days that followed, things at home got worse. Lisa must have sensed that I was pulling away because she doubled down on her usual garbage. More chores, more snide remarks, more accidental invasions of my space. She even started throwing out food I bought for myself, saying it was cluttering up her kitchen. But through all that, my mom surprised me. Whatever her motivation, she didn't waste time. She got a lawyer involved almost immediately. The next thing I knew, my dad got served with legal papers. Watching him freak out was, honestly, kind of satisfying. Let me tell you how this happened. So before things got to court, my mom told me we needed solid proof to back up what I was saying. She couldn't just rely on my story. She needed evidence. So I started paying closer attention to everything happening at home. First, I kept track of where my dad was spending his time. He always claimed he was working long hours to support the family, but I never bought it. Most days he left late and came home whenever he felt like it. He didn't seem stressed about money either, which didn't add up if he was actually struggling. Then one day I overheard him talking on the phone in the kitchen. He was laughing, saying something about finally having some time off. That's when it clicked. He wasn't working full-time anymore. I started digging through his stuff whenever he wasn't home, looking for anything that could prove it. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. In his desk drawer, I found a resignation letter addressed to his job, dated months ago. Apparently he'd quit, but he never told anyone. He'd been lying to my mom and me, pretending he was working to justify keeping her child support payments. But that wasn't all. I also found receipts for expensive dinners, shopping trips, and even a weekend getaway Lisa had taken. It was clear where the money was going, straight into funding their lifestyle while I was stuck paying rent and eating garbage. I took pictures of everything. Emails, receipts, the resignation letter. It all went into a folder on my phone. I felt like some kind of detective, piecing together a case against them. When the day in court finally came, I was nervous as hell. I'd never been in a courtroom before, and the idea of standing up there, telling everyone about my life, made me sick to my stomach. But I knew I had to do it. My mom didn't waste any time when we got in there. Her lawyer laid everything out. The years of child support payments, the proof that my dad had quit his job, the receipts showing where the money went. My dad didn't even try to deny it at first. He just sat there, looking like a deer caught in headlights. But when the judge started asking him questions, he tried to spin it. He said he'd been using the money to keep a roof over my head and support the household. The judge didn't seem convinced, especially when my mom's lawyer pointed out that I was paying rent and working to buy my own food. When it was my turn to speak, I felt my hands shaking as I stood up. I took a deep breath and started telling them everything. How I'd been working as a child, how Lisa made me hand over half my paycheck, how I had to do all the chores while they lived like royalty. I told them about the nights I went to bed hungry, the mornings I skipped breakfast because there was nothing to eat. By the time I finished, I felt like I'd been holding my breath the whole time. I looked at my dad, hoping he'd show some kind of remorse, but he just looked shocked, like he couldn't believe I had the guts to say it all out loud. Lisa wasn't there. She didn't even bother to show up. The judge listened carefully, asking a few questions here and there. I told him about finding the resignation letter and showed him the pictures I'd taken of the receipts and emails. My mom's lawyer handed over copies of everything, and the judge flipped through it all, his face getting more serious by the second. When he finally spoke, I'll never forget the look on my dad's face. The judge ruled in my mom's favor. She got custody of me, and they ordered my dad to pay back all the child support he'd taken, and to start paying my mom directly moving forward. The judge also threw in a warning about his behavior, saying that if he pulled anything like this again, there'd be cruel things he had to face. My dad didn't say a word. He just sat there, staring at the table like it might swallow him whole. Walking out of that courtroom felt surreal. I finally felt like someone had actually stood up for me. My mom, despite her rocky history with me, had come through. I wasn't sure if it was because she cared about me or because she hated that my dad had taken advantage of her, but either way, it didn't matter. Justice had been served. It might look like a happy ending, but it's really not that simple. My mom doesn't exactly want to be a mom, but she agreed to let me live with her as long as I keep working and taking care of myself. She's giving me a place to stay, and honestly, it's better than being stuck with Lisa and Dad, so I'll take it. I'm not expecting her to suddenly turn into the world's best mom or anything. We're basically roommates at this point. Honestly, it works out for her too. She gets to save money now that she's not paying child support, and I don't have to deal with my dad and Lisa anymore. It's not perfect, but it's a step up from where I was. I'll leave the story in here. I might come back with an update after I see how things will go with my mom. Final update. Hey, it's Mike again. I thought I'd give you an update since things have actually changed a lot over the past year. I'm 17 now, and I'm finally out of my dad's house. Honestly, it feels like I escaped a sinking ship. If you've been following my story, you know my mom stepped in and got custody after taking my dad to court. I moved in with her right after the judge's ruling. It wasn't a smooth transition, though. My mom and I didn't exactly have a close relationship, and it showed. At first, it felt like I was just staying with a distant relative. She didn't suddenly become a warm and loving parent overnight. She's not that type. But at least she gave me a roof over my head and stopped treating me like a walking ATM, so there's that. Living with my mom was weird at first. She had her own routines and wasn't used to having me around. I tried to keep my head down and not be a bother. I was actually used to doing that with Lisa, but it was hard not to feel out of place. She's not the sit down and talk about your feelings kind of person. Most of our conversations were about practical stuff, school, chores, groceries. But you know what? Even if she wasn't super involved, she at least made sure I had food to eat and clean clothes. That alone was a huge step up from what I was dealing with at my dad's place. I kept my part-time job, even though my mom told me I didn't have to. I just couldn't imagine not working. I guess I got so used to relying on myself that I didn't want to give that up. Plus, having my own money felt good. It gave me a sense of independence I wasn't ready to let go of. I haven't seen or heard much from my dad since I left, which is fine by me. From what my mom told me, he's been struggling to pay back all the child support he owes. Apparently, he had to pick up a second job just to keep up with the court's demands. Lisa? Who knows what she's up to? My mom said they're still together, but it's not like I care. I did hear from one of my cousins that my dad's been telling everyone I turned on him and made his life harder. Like, dude, you did that to yourself. I'm not losing sleep over it, though. If he wants to play the victim, that's on him. School's been better since I moved out. I can actually focus now that I'm not running on 2 hours of sleep and a pack of ramen. My grades aren't amazing, but they've improved a lot. I even started thinking about college, which is something I never thought I'd consider before. Work's still tough, but I've gotten better at managing my time. My boss at the store is pretty chill, and they've been giving me more hours since I've proven I can handle it. I've even started saving up for a car, which feels like a huge step toward getting more freedom. The best part? I don't have to hand over half my paycheck anymore. Every dollar I make is mine, and it feels amazing to finally have control over my own money. One thing I've realized over the past year is that it takes time to unlearn all the stuff I went through with my dad and Lisa. For a long time, I felt like I was just surviving, like I was stuck in fight or flight mode. Moving in with my mom forced me to confront a lot of the anger and resentment I'd been carrying around. I'm still working through it. Some days are better than others. I've been trying to think about the future more. I turn 18 in less than a year, and I'm already making plans to move out and get my own place. Don't get me wrong, living with my mom has been way better than being at my dad's, but I want to stand on my own 2 feet. College is still up in the air. I'm looking into trade schools and other options that won't leave me buried in debt. Right now, I'm leaning towards something in construction or mechanics. I like the idea of building something with my hands, something tangible. It's wild to think about where I was a year ago. Back then, I felt completely stuck, like I had no options and no one in my corner. Now, I'm finally starting to see a way forward. It's not perfect, and there's still a lot I need to figure out, but I feel like I'm heading in the right direction. To anyone out there who feels like they're trapped in a bad situation, all I can say is this: keep pushing. It's not easy, and it might take longer than you'd like, but things can get better. You just have to take it one step at a time. That's it for now. I'll probably update again on my 18th birthday and figure out what's next. Thanks for reading, and for all the advice and support along the way. It's helped more than you know.
Hey there. I'm Juliana Bridges, a 38-year-old working at an advertising agency. In our little unit, it's me, my husband David, and our 8-year-old daughter Mia. We're not swimming in money, but we do all right. You see, the advertising agency I work for takes care of us pretty nicely. I mean, my paycheck is quite something, especially when you compare it to what others in similar office gigs are getting. Yep, I bring home a pretty hefty salary. I've never had to worry about spending money each month, and we've even been able to save up for Mia's college tuition. Considering the cost of living and our home mortgage, we've always had some extra money left over. David was well aware of my high salary, and perhaps his pride was hurt because a year ago he quit his job and started freelancing in web design. He said he switched to freelancing because his salary job had hidden its pay ceiling, but I was skeptical about how much one could really earn as a freelancer. Of course, I objected when he said he wanted to quit. I thought it would be safer to stay in his job, get his full retirement benefits, and then think about other options. But David was adamant about freelancing, so that's what he did. Ever since he began freelancing, David has been working from home. Maybe his stated reason for quitting his job was just a cover, and he was really tired of the office politics. Either way, I had to get used to a new routine where David was always home when I left for work. At first, Mia seemed happy that her dad was always at home when she came back from school, but lately she seemed somewhat discontented. She probably feels like she's being constantly watched. She's only 8, but Mia is more mature than her classmates. So, our life was going along without any major issues, but I didn't notice that the cracks started appearing when David began working from home. When David started working from home, I asked him if he could help a little with the household chores. "Can you help with things like cleaning and laundry? I'll still cook the meals, like I always have." "Excuse me, why do I have to do housework? You're home more, and you have more free time. It'd be nice if you could help out a bit when you're not too tired." "Free? Just because I'm a freelancer doesn't mean I'm not busy. In fact, I've got a lot on my plate. I can't deal with household stuff on top of that." Unbelievable. David just brushed aside my modest request. I understand that freelancing can be more unstable and mentally taxing compared to a regular salaried job. That's one reason why I didn't want him to switch in the first place. But household chores are nobody's specific job, and I've been doing them all alone, even though we've both been working. I thought you could share some of the load. But I work too, you know. It should be equal. You've managed everything by yourself up until now. Don't start complaining now. David, who was convinced he was in the right, wouldn't listen to me at all. In the end, I continued to handle all the household chores as usual. I don't assume he's not busy just because he works from home, but whenever I return home late at night, I'd invariably find David sprawled in front of the TV or deeply engrossed in his smartphone. "Is dinner ready?" he'd ask with an air of entitlement which always infuriated me. What's more, since working from home, he seemed to become more concerned about cleanliness, always demanding that I clean the house more thoroughly, pointing out every little piece of dirt on the floor, the windows, and the bathroom. "If you're so concerned, why don't you clean it up yourself? I'm only human. I can't get to everything," I'd reply. "You're talking back to me. Clean up your own mess. It's our family's home. It's not like I'm the only one making it dirty." Yet David would go off on these bizarre tangents, and I was utterly baffled by his logic. Mia would quietly listen to our exchanges from a distance. You know, Dad's always glued to his phone. I wish we could go out together on weekends, but Daddy's always busy on his phone, Mia said one Sunday morning as I was preparing breakfast. Apparently, Mia had asked David to go out and play the previous evening, but he'd refused, barely looking up from his phone. That's true. He's always on that phone. He's been like that since before you come home from work. Sometimes he's on calls, too. Calls? Yeah, he always sounds friendly, and I can hear a woman's voice. That's odd. From Mia's account, it didn't seem like David was talking to a client or a colleague. I tried to think of who he could be talking to so frequently. As a freelancer, I was unfamiliar with the world of freelancing, so I didn't know. But the mention of a woman's voice was definitely bothering me. Could he be having an affair? It wasn't unthinkable. He had started working from home only a few months ago, and he now had more free time than when he had a regular job. Trying to not let Mia see my agitation, I focused on preparing breakfast. Several months passed since David started freelancing. He still never helped with any of the household chores, and he began spending whole days away from home during weekends. I have work to do. Freelancers don't get days off, he'd say as he left the house, dressed sharper than usual, even wearing cologne and accessories he didn't normally use. I had my suspicions, but with no evidence, confronting him would be pointless. Besides, even if David was cheating, I was torn about what I should do. I knew it would be better to part ways, but thinking of Mia, it wasn't an easy decision. Every day, I agonized over the potential consequences for Mia of taking her father away from her. Our lives continued in this way, but a turning point was soon to come. One Monday morning, as I was preparing for work, Mia didn't get up as usual, and I was getting anxious that she'd be late for school. Mia, it's morning. You need to get up or you'll be late for school. When I went to Mia's room to wake her up, she looked completely drained. I rushed to her side, placing my hand on her forehead. You're burning up, Mia. Yeah, I got a thermometer and took her temperature. It read 103 degrees Fahrenheit. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't take the day off today. I had an important meeting. While I was panicking, David entered the room. What happened, David? Mia is running a high fever. I can't take the day off from work today. Maybe we should call a babysitter. A babysitter. I'll take care of her. Just let her rest, all right? I can make her some soup. It'll be fine. I was utterly taken aback by David's sudden willingness to take care of Mia. David, who had never lifted a finger to help with household chores or child rearing, now offering to care for our daughter when she's sick. Unbelievable. Though I found it hard to believe, I decided to trust him given the urgency of the situation. All right, thank you. There's some fruit in the fridge. Give her some if she feels like eating. Got it. Relieved by David's reassuring response, I hurriedly got ready and left the house. I was deeply concerned about Mia, but arriving at work on time was my top priority for the moment. By the time I reached my office in New York, the skies had darkened and it had started raining. Fortunately, I had a foldable umbrella with me, so I reached the office without getting wet. The meeting began the afternoon as scheduled, but I couldn't stop thinking about Mia. The office was abuzz due to the sound of heavy rain and strong winds from outside. Come to think of it, wasn't there news about a hurricane approaching? I'd been so busy lately that I hadn't been keeping up with the weather updates, but I remembered a warning about a hurricane making landfall tonight. During the meeting, all of my colleagues, including myself, were constantly distracted by the storm outside, frequently glancing out the windows. By 7:00 p.m., when I was finally done with work and heading home, the earlier storm had turned into a torrential downpour, causing several train delays. The train I was supposed to catch was also delayed, and the platform was packed with people. I was really worried about Mia, who was running a high fever and couldn't bear the thought of waiting there. I hurriedly left the station and began looking for a taxi. There were many others waiting for taxis too, so it took quite a while, but after about 30 minutes I finally managed to hail one. After a 30-minute ride, I arrived home but was speechless at the sight that greeted me. Mia. To my horror, Mia was lying unconscious in front of our entrance. I quickly scooped her up. "Mia, are you okay? What happened, Daddy?" Seeing me might have comforted her, as after she whispered, "Daddy," she just slumped, looking exhausted. Despite being drenched in rain, her body was burning up. I turned to the taxi I just got off from and knocked on the window. "I'm sorry I need you again. Please take us to the nearest hospital." Seeing Mia's condition and my desperation, the driver quickly opened the door, understanding the gravity of the situation. I quickly hopped into the taxi. "I need to get to the nearest hospital fast." "Mia, Mia," throughout the ride, I kept calling out to Mia. I felt if I didn't, something terrible might happen to her. I desperately wanted to know why she was outside in the first place, especially during a storm. But right now, saving her was more important. Despite the heavy rain and the slow-moving traffic, we finally reached the hospital. "Ma'am, do take care, especially if you're heading back in this storm," the kind taxi driver said as he dropped us off. "Thank you so much," I replied, grateful for his concern. With a kind-hearted driver seeing me off, I rushed Mia to the hospital. Even though the hospital was busy with many patients, the receptionist quickly realized the urgency upon seeing Mia's condition and got her immediate attention. 30 minutes later, a doctor finally examined Mia, informing me that she was semi-conscious due to a high fever. Thankfully, she had no physical injuries. If her fever reduces, she should be okay. However, given that she'd apparently been outside in the rain for hours with that fever, she had to be admitted immediately, the doctor explained. "Mia, I'm so sorry. I hope you feel better soon," a nurse said reassuringly. "We'll take good care of her. You should rest today," she added, acknowledging my exhaustion. After spending 5 hours at the hospital endlessly staring at Mia's pained face as she slept, a nurse finally approached me. Though I wanted to stay by Mia's side, I was exhausted both physically and mentally. Having worked all day and then seeing Mia in this state, I was spent. I decided it was best to let the nurses handle it and head home. Everything that happened to Mia was undoubtedly David's fault. Mia murmuring "Daddy" before passing out was evidence enough. It was inconceivable that Mia, with such a high fever, would willingly go outside, especially not during a storm. The more I thought about what David had done, the angrier I became. Unable to comprehend or forgive him, all the way home I pondered what to say to him. If he hears that Mia is okay, he might think it's all right to continue with his reckless behavior in the future. I absolutely don't want that to happen. I needed him to deeply reflect on his actions. Even more than feeling remorse with a certain resolve, I headed home. When I arrived, wet from the rain, David was casually fiddling with his smartphone. Noticing me, he looked up in surprise. "Hey, where's Mia? Wasn't she sleeping?" he asked at the entrance. She said she wanted to play outside. I told her not to, but she wouldn't listen. Seeing David ask that with such nonchalance made my anger boil over. Mia went out on her own. He's the one who tossed her out in the first place. I clenched my fists tightly and replied. "She just passed away," I said, feeling a surge of emotion. "What?" As I stood in the doorway, David stared at me with a dumbfounded look. The shock of hearing that his daughter had died seemed too much for him to grasp. "What are you talking about? Stop playing sick jokes. That's in bad taste," he said, incredulous. The nerve of him to mock me as I stood there, drenched from the rain. "It's not a lie. What have you done?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "I'll handle the funeral arrangements, so stay away from the house for a while." "Goodbye," I said firmly, storming out of the house. Seeing me shaking with rage, it finally hit David how serious the situation was. "Are you for real?" he blurted out, realizing the gravity of the situation. But his reaction seemed so detached, as if it was happening to someone else, which irritated me even more. I turned on my heels, the fury inside me blazing. "I won't ever forgive him. I'll drag him down to hell if I have to," I thought as I stormed out of the house. I managed to find a vacant hotel and decided to stay there for a while. Although it would cost me, now wasn't the time to worry about money. I wanted to get back at David. If he felt remorse and changed his ways after hearing about Mia's death, I might reconsider my approach. But seeing that he didn't call or message me that day, it was clear he couldn't care less about what happened to Mia. This only fueled my anger further, and I began to devise a plan to make him pay. The next morning, I woke up and immediately headed to the hospital. I got word that Mia had regained consciousness. "Mia, are you okay?" I asked anxiously. "Mom, yeah, I'm fine now. My fever's gone down," Maya replied with a weak smile. "Oh, thank goodness." I hugged Mia tightly and gently stroked her head. She giggled as if tickled by the gesture, relishing the joy of Mia's return. Eventually, I pressed her for the truth. "Mia, what happened yesterday?" "Daddy kicked me out. He said I was in the way and told me to leave," Mia explained, her voice trembling. Then a woman came in and they chatted like they were close. "A woman? What did she look like?" I asked, feeling a sense of dread. I didn't get a good look, but she was young. She had bright red nails and wore skinny heels. I couldn't believe it. David was having an affair. Not only did he bring his mistress home on a day Mia had a high fever, but he also locked his own daughter outside. It was beyond comprehension. How could he do something so horrible? "I'm sorry, Mia. That must have been terrifying," I said, trying to comfort her. "Yeah, but I was happy you came to save me," Maya replied, her eyes shining with gratitude. For David to put Mia through such trauma and think he could be happy with his mistress, it was unforgivable. I felt a burning rage consuming me. "By the way, Daddy said he's going to invite that lady over again next Sunday," Mia added. "Next Sunday? That's the day I'm supposed to go on the company trip. He's planning to spend a fun day with his mistress while I'm away," I exclaimed, appalled. But it strengthened my resolve. "Thanks for telling me," I patted Mia's back, vowing to get back at David. The following Sunday, I decided to take Mia and return home. I informed my company that, due to personal reasons, I wouldn't be able to attend the trip. After Mia was discharged, we had been staying at the hotel together. It had been a while since we were home, but as we approached the front door, it felt like we were entering someone else's house. "We're home," I announced as Mia and I entered the house like usual. Sure enough, there were unfamiliar high heels at the entrance, just as Mia had said. The thought of David and his mistress enjoying themselves deeper in the house made my skin crawl. David wasn't in the living room, so I headed to the bedroom, thinking that Mia might witness something too intense. I hesitated for a moment, but the room was quiet. As I listened closely, I could hear David's voice coming from the bedroom. "You know, it really worked out for me with Mia gone. It made breaking up easier," David's voice echoed through the room. "How can you say such a thing about your own daughter?" The woman's voice responded. "But yeah, for me, it was kind of lucky," David continued. Hearing the two of them talking about Mia's supposed death, as if it was a good thing or lucky, made my head spin. It was clear now. David didn't feel an ounce of remorse. If that's the case, it's time to confront him directly, I thought, stealing myself. "Excuse us," I said as Mia and I appeared after opening the bedroom door. The two of them were taken aback with wide eyes. "Why the hell are you here? You said you were on a company trip," David exclaimed, bewildered. "And why is Mia here?" the woman added, equally surprised. "What do you mean? Wasn't Mia supposed to be dead?" David said, his voice rising in panic. "I suppose it would be quite shocking to see Mia, who they believed to be dead, standing right in front of them," I explained calmly. "The part about Mia being dead was a lie. I'm sorry, I just wanted to see your reaction. I hoped you might show some remorse, but instead, you're here celebrating Mia's supposed death. That's just insane," I said, feeling a mix of frustration and disappointment. "A lie. Damn it, you played with my feelings," David exclaimed, his face contorted with anger. "Don't mess with me. You're the one who kicked Mia out of the house, right?" I shot back, my voice trembling with rage. "No, I didn't. Daddy did kick me out. He said I was in the way because he wanted to be with that woman," Mia interjected, her voice filled with hurt. With Mia's swift revelation, David's face turned pale. "That's right, you did the worst possible thing, not just as a father, but as a human being," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Mia was in such a condition that it wouldn't have been surprising if she had died, and you prioritized being with that woman over her," I added, pointing at the woman who had been silently watching our confrontation. "Oh, calling her my mistress, that's not right. She's a colleague from work," David tried to defend himself, but his words fell flat. "Wait, didn't you say you quit your job and you're freelancing now?" I asked, catching him off guard. "Well, David hesitated, unable to come up with a convincing lie. "We don't really need to ask her now, do we? Here's the evidence of your affair." I thrust a large envelope towards David. After hearing about David's affair, I decided to get a thorough investigation, but I never imagined the evidence would pile up so quickly. "Seems like David isn't very good at hiding things," I added, watching as David's face drained of color. Hesitantly, David opened the envelope, and as he pulled out the photos, he dropped them, scattering the evidence of his affair all over the floor. "This is so unfair. Do you enjoy cornering someone like this and putting them in a situation where they can't escape?" David exclaimed, his voice shaking with anger. "Don't mess with me. You're the one who kicked Mia out of the house, right?" I shot back, my voice trembling with rage. "No, I didn't. Daddy did kick me out. He said I was in the way because he wanted to be with that woman," Mia interjected, her voice filled with hurt. With Mia's swift revelation, David's face turned pale. "That's right, you did the worst possible thing, not just as a father, but as a human being," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Mia was in such a condition that it wouldn't have been surprising if she had died, and you prioritized being with that woman over her," I added, pointing at the woman who had been silently watching our confrontation. "Oh, calling her my mistress, that's not right. She's a colleague from work," David tried to defend himself, but his words fell flat. "Wait, didn't you say you quit your job and you're freelancing now?" I asked, catching him off guard. "Well, David hesitated, unable to come up with a convincing lie. "We don't really need to ask her now, do we? Here's the evidence of your affair." I thrust a large envelope towards David. After hearing about David's affair, I decided to get a thorough investigation, but I never imagined the evidence would pile up so quickly. "Seems like David isn't very good at hiding things," I added, watching as David's face drained of color. Hesitantly, David opened the envelope, and as he pulled out the photos, he dropped them, scattering the evidence of his affair all over the floor. "This is so unfair. Do you enjoy cornering someone like this and putting them in a situation where they can't escape?" David exclaimed, his voice shaking with anger. "Who's the real coward here? I see no worth in staying with someone so thoughtless any longer," I retorted, feeling a surge of determination. "Let's get a divorce," I said firmly, thrusting a business card towards David. His eyes widened as he stared at the card, realizing the gravity of the situation. "Oh, and by the way, once we're separated, you'll, of course, be responsible for asset division and child support," I continued, not giving him a chance to protest. "I'll make sure to inform your company and your parents about everything. Be prepared for that," I added, watching as David's face paled even further. I glanced at the woman, his affair partner. "As for you, what? Why me?" "I didn't know anything about this," she protested, her voice trembling with fear. "Don't you know? You destroyed a family with your actions. You have to take responsibility," I replied sternly, my eyes narrowing at her. The woman began to panic, messing up her hair in distress. Both Mia and I watched her coldly. "If you don't have the money, find a way to get it. You two are in love, right? You should be able to overcome this together. Just never show up in front of Mia and me again," I said firmly, feeling a sense of justice. "I'll give you the house, but you're still responsible for the mortgage," I added, watching as David's face contorted with shock and disbelief. "Wait," David tried to protest, but I pulled Mia away, determined to protect her from any further harm. "Yes, Mia is going to lose her father, but I have no regrets. I won't put Mia in harm's way ever again. We'll do our best from now on, okay, Maya?" I asked, looking down at her. "Yeah," Maya replied, her eyes shining with determination. Mia looked surprisingly happy, which put me at ease. I decided to go back to my childhood home with Mia and stay there for a while. My parents were livid with David for cheating and putting Mia through such pain, to the point where they felt like giving David a piece of their mind. But I managed to calm them down and avoid further issues. "You can stay here as long as you need," my mom said warmly, hugging Mia tightly. "Thank you both," I replied gratefully, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. For now, everything seemed all right. As for David, he got a lawyer and managed to settle the child support and asset division in one payment. I couldn't imagine David having millions saved up, so he probably took on some debt. And with the remaining mortgage to pay off, David must be stretched pretty thin right now. A coworker from my company who went to high school with David updated me about him. Apparently, he ended up breaking up with his mistress. David had boasted to her about having money, so when the truth came out, they quickly parted ways. David's income was already halved from what he used to make as a salaried employee, so it's understandable. Now, in addition to his freelance work, he's scrambling with various part-time jobs. After losing his wife, daughter, and mistress, David will probably live a frugal life, paying off his debts. He got what he deserved. I hope he learns from his hardships and regrets his actions. "Mommy, today at school I made Grandparents' Day gifts for Grandma and Grandpa," Maya said excitedly. "Really? Let's give it to them later together, okay?" I replied, smiling at Mia. Seeing Mia so lively and happy, even without David around, made me feel content. From now on, I'm going to move forward at my own pace, with Mia by my side.